Welcome back, and we are continuing on with our Napoleon series from Epic History TV. The last time we left off, 1806, Napoleon once again completely crushes his enemies, kicks Austria out of the war, and completely defeats Prussia, embarrassing Prussia. Yeah, they're fantastic. If you haven't checked them out, go check them out already. I'll leave a thing in the top left here. But now it's time for Napoleon to defeat Russia. Friedland, 1807. Let's have a look.
History TV History March collaboration.
So one question I have actually is that Epic History TV and History March, is History March its own channel? Or, I probably should have just looked this up on YouTube before, but is History March its own channel, or are they always collaborating? I don't know, because it seems like every video so far in this Napoleon series has been in collaboration with History March. Anyways.
Supported by our sponsor, Skillshare, home of more than 22,000 online classes. Find out about our exclusive special offer at the end of the video.
I should learn how to edit. That would be useful now, wouldn't it? Or make maps like this.
1 week before Christmas 1806, French Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte arrived in the Polish city of Warsaw, then part of Prussia.
Beautiful city, by the way.
A year had passed since his great victory over the Austrians and Russians at Austerlitz, and 2 months since he'd hammered the Prussians at Jena. But Russia still had powerful forces in the field, the most important of which was the Russian First Army, commanded by General Bennigsen. Napoleon would not be master of Europe until it was defeated, and Russia and Prussia forced to make peace. But that winter, Napoleon's first attempt to trap Bennigsen near Pultusk got bogged down in thick Polish mud. The Russians withdrew to Białystok. The French army, half-starved and frozen, was ordered into winter quarters. While in Warsaw, Napoleon began a famous affair with a young Polish noblewoman, Marie Walewska. In the late 18th century, the once mighty Polish
So one thing too is that what they mention a lot is that Napoleon's army is basically half-starved, completely exhausted, everything like this, but yet they still continue to keep fighting. And I know that obviously military conditions, depending on where you are in the world now compared to then, and obviously the technology we have makes it life a little bit more comfortable for your average soldier. But I always wonder, like, how is morale doing, right? Like, does morale really, up until he actually fully invades Russia, and we'll get to those videos later, but I'm curious what the morale was like over time through the Napoleonic Wars. And if you know, again, this is not a subject I know a lot about. If you know, write it down below, please.
The Lithuanian Commonwealth had been swallowed up by its neighbours, Russia, Austria, and Prussia, in a series of annexations known as partitions. Until in 1795, a third and final partition wiped Poland off the map. Now, Polish patriots looked to Napoleon as their saviour, praying that his victories against their occupiers would lead to the rebirth of a Polish state. Marie Walewska became Napoleon's mistress in order to further this cause. Ordinary French soldiers, however, had little love for Poland. It was impoverished, freezing, and they missed home. Desertion rates soared.
Okay, that sort of answers the question about morale.
There were even 100 cases of suicide.
Oof. Wow.
Marshal Ney, commanding 6th Corps, sent patrols towards Heilsberg, looking for better quarters. What they found were Russian and Prussian soldiers on the move. They'd stumbled into a surprise winter attack by Bennigsen.
Wow.
Napoleon quickly laid a trap for the Russian army, ordering Ney and Bernadotte to retreat and lure Bennigsen west, while he led the rest of the army north to fall on his flank and rear. But the Russians captured a French courier carrying the Emperor's orders to Marshal Bernadotte. Bennigsen, now warned of the trap, ordered a retreat, fighting a series of rearguard skirmishes against the pursuing French. But he refused to give up the city of Königsberg without a fight.
Of course, because Königsberg, at this point, just in case you don't know, one of the, probably the most important city in Prussia at this point. It's the capital of Prussia, and this is where Prussia was formed as well, originally. So another question that I have too is that, like, they have to abandon their winter quarters, and now they're pushing north, and then they have to re-quarter again. Like, I don't know, just, it already said morale is super low. You think this would tank it even further, right? And lower their effectiveness as a fighting force.
And turned to give battle at Eylau.
Yeah, or a massacre without any result.
The Battle of Eylau, fought over 2 days, was one of the most brutal of the Napoleonic Wars, fought in freezing conditions, with neither side backing down. Marshal Augereau's 7th Corps, advancing into the face of a snowstorm, lost its way and was cut to pieces by Russian cannon fire. 5 French Eagles were lost. Napoleon's army was only saved by a devastating massed cavalry charge by 10,000 horsemen, led by the fearless Marshal Murat, and remembered as one of the great cavalry charges in history.
Yep.
At Eylau, for the first time as emperor, Napoleon failed to win a clear victory on the battlefield. He and the Russians covered up the true scale of their losses, but both sides are estimated to have lost 1/3 of their armies in the carnage.
Oh my, wow.
After the horrors of Eylau, both armies sought time to rest and recover. Meanwhile, the newly formed French 10th Corps under Marshal Lefebvre besieged Danzig, held by 13,000 Prussians under General Kalkreuth. The city came under heavy French bombardment and infantry assault. After 8 weeks, with no prospect of reinforcement, the Prussian garrison surrendered on the 27th of May.
Okay, that's
Napoleon's northern sea flank was now secure against any possible Russian landing.
Exactly.
The French Emperor now commanded an army 190,000 strong, against just 115,000 Russian and Prussian troops. But it was Bennigsen who moved first, launching a surprise attack against Ney's 6th Corps on the 5th of June.
Alright, although this video isn't done yet, Bennigsen seems like a very competent general here.
Ney conducted a brilliant fighting withdrawal and escaped. Bennigsen, having lost the element of surprise, and with Napoleon advancing, retreated once more.
See, and that's the thing, is that he, unlike, the Italians during the Italian campaign with the other videos that I did, so the little Corporal Napoleon in Italy, where they just continued on the fight, Bennigsen seems to actually retreat and recover and then be able, and doesn't really try and tackle head on. I don't know, it just seems a little bit wiser to me. Me literally sitting in an armchair being a general.
4 days later at Heilsberg, the French lost 10,000 men in a botched assault against Russian defences.
Right.
But the Russians continued their retreat the next day. Napoleon thought Bennigsen would head north to Königsberg, but instead he retreated northeast, keeping to the east bank of the Aller River. So when Napoleon's army marched north, it was Marshal Lannes' reserve corps on his right flank that next encountered the Russian army, near the small town of Friedland.
The destruction that these small towns are seeing, too.
In the late afternoon of the 13th of June, Russian cavalry scouts informed General Bennigsen that they'd found a single French corps at Friedland.
Oh god, this is gonna be bad.
Bennigsen decided he had time to cross the Aller River and smash this isolated corps before the rest of the French army could arrive to save it. And he ordered his army to begin crossing the river.
Again, I've commented on this already. Here's the point where Napoleon's going to be at his lowest, or it seems like the French army is at its lowest. It looks like this corps is going to be obliterated, and Napoleon's probably going to come in and save it somehow. Let's find out.
Marshal Lannes, commanding 16,000 men and facing 46,000 Russians, sent an urgent message to Napoleon that he was under attack from the main Russian army.
Basically 3-1.
Then he fought a skillful delaying action.
See, this is the thing I love about Epic History TV too. It's like they even add the little thing here that's going on to tell Napoleon. That's great.
Hiding the weakness of his force behind a large screen of skirmishers, while gradually yielding ground to the enemy. Lannes was still holding off the Russians as darkness fell. That night, Russian engineers built 3 pontoon bridges at Friedland to speed the movement of troops over the river. But Bennigsen was taking a huge risk. If this turned into a major battle, his army would have to fight with its back to the river and the steep banks of the Mill Stream dividing its left wing from its right.
I call that foreshadowing, I think.
Bennigsen had also badly underestimated the speed at which Napoleon's Grande Armée would react. The first French reinforcements arrived that night. The Emperor himself wasn't far behind.
This is what I mean. Like, it seems like all is doomed, and yet here he is. He's going to come save the day again.
By dawn on the 14th of June,
man.
about 40,000 Russians had crossed to the west bank of the Aller River. Bennigsen ordered an attack on the village of Heinrichsdorf to turn the French left flank. But French cavalry reinforcements, led by General Grouchy, intercepted the Russians. In more than an hour of charge and countercharge, the French horsemen finally drove the Russians back. Marshal Mortier's 8th Corps now arrived to reinforce the French centre. In Sortlac Wood, General Oudinot's elite Grenadier Division fought stubbornly against Prince Bagration's left wing, but was outnumbered by the Russians and gradually pushed back. Around noon on a sweltering day, Napoleon himself arrived. He was soon followed by 1st Corps, commanded by General Victor, standing in for the wounded Marshal Bernadotte, as well as Ney's 6th Corps and the Imperial Guard under Marshal Bessières.
And again, like I know at this time, right, Bennigsen is not looking at a map where you can see, you know, all the French corps on a digital map here, but oh boy. Yeah, see what I mean? Napoleon backs up against the wall. Here it comes.
The date, the 14th of June, held special significance for Napoleon.
His birthday?
It was the 7th anniversary of his great victory over the Austrians at Marengo.
Oh, okay,
A good omen, he declared. The battle then entered a lull, as Napoleon assessed the situation, saw Bennigsen's dangerous position, and issued orders for an attack to take advantage of it. Bennigsen, meanwhile, who was tormented by ill health throughout the day, saw that he now faced the full might of Napoleon's army, and issued orders for a retreat.
Uh-oh. With your back against a river. Advance looking right nor left, bore into this thick mass, cost what it may. Oof.
But before Bennigsen's retreat could get underway, at 5:30 p.m, 3 salvos from the French guns signalled the start of Napoleon's attack. It was led by Ney's 6th Corps on the right wing, who first cleared Bagration's infantry from Sortlac Wood. But as Ney's troops left the cover of the trees, they came under heavy fire from Russian cannon across the river. As the French attack faltered, Prince Bagration rallied his men and launched a cavalry counterattack. Ney's corps retreated.
Okay.
But now General Victor's 1st Corps came up on his left. Its artillery commander, General Senarmont, advanced with 30 guns and blasted the Russians at point-blank range with case shot.
Ooh. Ouch.
Hundreds of Russians were mown down within minutes.
Yeah.
Under this onslaught, Bagration's men began to waver and then retreat. Around 7 p.m, the Russian Imperial Guard launched a desperate counterattack to try to halt the French advance on Friedland. But they were outnumbered and outgunned.
Okay.
As exploding shells began to start fires in Friedland, the French centre and left wing joined the attack.
Oh, uh-oh. And those pontoon bridges, they're only here, right? This whole corps up here.
Its only escape route under threat, the entire Russian army began a panicked retreat towards the river. But Friedland's houses and bridges were now ablaze.
Yep.
The town became a deadly trap for the Russians. Many were drowned trying to cross the river.
This is like
others
a way
killed or captured. North of Friedland, some units were able to escape across a ford or along the river bank. But there was no disguising the Russians' terrible defeat. The Battle of Friedland was one of the most decisive victories of Napoleon's career.
Yeah. Again.
At the cost of 10,000 casualties, he had inflicted twice 40? As many losses on the Russians.
20,000.
About 20,000 men, killed, wounded or taken prisoner. 40% of Bennigsen's army.
Alright, how did they not come to terms here?
The Prussians abandoned Königsberg the next day, which was occupied by Soult's 4th Corps, while Bennigsen's shattered army retreated across the river Niemen into Russia.
Wow.
Tsar Alexander's advisors implored him to make peace with Napoleon.
Yeah.
He accepted their advice, and a ceasefire was agreed.
Okay, so it... Alright.
Alexander and Napoleon met for the first time aboard a raft in the middle of the river Niemen,
oh, yes, I remember
near
this.
Tilsit, and developed an immediate rapport. Tilsit proved to be one of history's great diplomatic summits, as the two emperors feted each other for days, with banquets, parades and concerts, then discussed affairs late into the night. A friendship of sorts developed, while Russia's former ally, King Frederick William of Prussia, was left out in the cold. And it was...
And you gotta think, Napoleon's occupying his capital, right? While, you know, the Russian emperor is courting Napoleon and Napoleon's courting him. And his country is completely under occupation.
It was Prussia who would lose most in the treaties of Tilsit, signed 2 weeks later. 1/3 of Prussian territory was taken away to create the new Kingdom of Westphalia, to be ruled by Napoleon's 22-year-old brother Jerome, and the Duchy of Warsaw, to be ruled by the King of Saxony, which Polish patriots hoped would prove a stepping stone on the road to their own state. Polish troops were recruited into the Grande Armée, with Polish lancers even forming part of Napoleon's elite Imperial Guard. Russia only had to give up the Ionian Islands, as Alexander accepted an alliance with Napoleon that left the French emperor master of Europe. Alexander even agreed to join the continental system,
Right, but then
Napoleon's economic blockade of Great Britain, which banned British ships and goods from all French-controlled ports.
this wouldn't last.
The system had been established the previous winter by Napoleon's Berlin Decree. Napoleon hoped that by cutting off British trade with Europe, he'd cause financial chaos and political upheaval in Britain, allowing him to make a favourable peace. There was just one problem. The continental system didn't work.
Yep.
Not only was it impossible to enforce and undermined by widespread smuggling, the system damaged French trade just as much as British trade. The decisive weapon in this economic war would prove to be the British Royal Navy,
Yep.
which that summer ensured its continued naval dominance by launching a preemptive strike against the neutral Danish fleet at Copenhagen.
Yep. And I was there, actually. So I was in Copenhagen about 3 weeks ago, and I visited this port, and you would never tell, obviously. There's not, I mean, it happened so long ago. It happened in 1807, but yeah, I was there. So that was kind of cool to see that little piece of history.
Capturing their warships before they could fall into Napoleon's hands. Royal Navy squadrons blockaded all major French ports, seizing any ships trading with France, while ensuring British merchants could continue to trade overseas in relative safety. The Navy even seized the tiny Danish island of Heligoland as a base for smuggling British goods into Europe. But most disastrously for Napoleon, the continental system would draw him into two conflicts that proved ruinous for his empire. The first would be fought in the Iberian Peninsula, where Napoleon decided to force Britain's ally, Portugal, to join the continental system.
Probably his first blunder.
In November 1807, French troops, supported by their Spanish ally, invaded the country.
Yep.
The Portuguese royal family fled to their colony of Brazil, as the French occupied Lisbon without a fight.
Fun fact, too. So the royal family fleeing to Brazil actually led to Brazil, a lot of their infrastructure being built up, and a whole series of events that took place from there in South American history. And I don't remember it all off the top of my head, but them fleeing to Brazil, and Napoleon actually has a large effect on Brazilian history as well, and the history of South America and what continued on from there.
It looked as though Napoleon had won yet another easy victory. But the Peninsular War was just beginning.
It was going to be the beginning of the end. So at this point, wow, okay, so 1808 is obviously up next, and so Napoleon's at his peak, but it's just starting to fall. So this is really the peak for Napoleon. Let's keep going from here. Thank you very much for joining me so far. I hope you're enjoying it. If you haven't already yet, please remember to like, comment, subscribe. Take care. All the best, and I'll see you guys in the next video.